The blackhead removal, no? It's like slight ASMR is there when you remove.
ASMR. You mean like BDSM something? What is the full form of ASMR?
Autonomous sensory meridian response is a tingling sensation
Okay.
that begins on the scalp and moves down the neck and upper spine. It
Huh.
has visual triggers, it has sensory triggers, it has audio triggers.
Oh, okay.
No,
It
anything.
is not ASMR though. It is BDSM.
See, BDSM is also. Why is BDSM fun?
ASMR.
No, there is an element of masochism in all ASMR, right? People like to,
This
the
is the
feeling,
podcast.
odd, that oddly satisfying feeling when you pluck out something.
Huh, but there is
Why
no.
do you think people keep picking at a pimple or at a scab?
Why do we bite nails because of BDSM?
No, biting nails is different. I don't think there's any ASMR or BDSM in that, or PTSD for that matter.
I like how we've graduated to four-letter acronyms and not three-letter. Three-letter acronyms is the world
Yeah.
of the tech bros. We are more evolved, so we'll use
Four-letter
four-letter acronyms.
acronyms, our users should love it, and hence they should C4BR.
Leftover lasagne.
Leftover lasagna.
Lasagna, no way.
It's a type of sandwich.
Some kind of gross pasta.
Leftover
Leftover
lasagna is a
podcast
hosted
by
by
my
Nitin
judge.
Sundar and Tony Uncle. Leftover lasagna.
Very funny name.
Hello and welcome to Leftover Lasagne, the ultimate luxury podcast. That's right. This is the podcast that is handmade from start to finish by two crafty men. That takes much longer than required to put together because we insist on doing everything ourselves. It has a niche and discerning audience that's willing to pay with the most valuable resource of all, their time. Can you create a podcast quicker and cheaper like this in China? Probably yes. But will it be just as good? Let's not go there. I am Tony, and joining me is the real reason why people follow this podcast. The man with magic in his hands that no robot can outdo. His touch can tickle you like a feather and singe you like leather. The man who holds the end of the tether and to boot has a fantastic nether. The man who will tie you up in knots and leave you in stitches. The Perkin work in this podcast is the man they call the Birkin. Say hi, Nitin Sundar.
Hi, Tony. Thank you so much for another lovely intro. It's almost like the term bespoke came up because two men decided to sit in front of mics and start talking to each other and create a
Why?
podcast.
Because bees spoke. Or throw a stone into a hornet's nest and then bees poke you. This is what it is.
Explain that.
Bees.
Oh, bees. Oh, that bespoke.
This is strangely opposite because when a bee stings you or pokes you, it dies. I had to sacrifice my dignity to make this joke, much like a bee stinging you. But you're speaking like a man who has recently been exposed to dogs, snakes, bites, venoms, jackfruits, etc. What is happening? Nitin, what have you been doing since we recorded
Oh,
the last episode?
all right. So this weekend, the last weekend, I made a trip to Kerala to this small village called Ottapalam, which is close to Palakkad and Coimbatore. It's in the Tamil Nadu Kerala border. One of my cousins actually hails from there, and there is this annual tradition that happens in a bunch of Hindu Kerala villages, which is called the Sarpam Tullal, which is like a evening dedicated to the snake gods, where
Nagin dance.
Nagin dance redux in South India. Indeed, it's quite a ritual to be a part of, and the center point of this ritual is a bunch of incantations are evoked, the chanda and a couple of other extremely interesting sounding musical instruments that are endemic to Kerala are sort of used, and there's a lot of chanting and stuff that happens, and in the middle of all of that, the entire village gathers in a certain area where a rangoli, a column is sort of made. The center point of this entire process is when a bunch of women actually get supposedly possessed by the snake gods and start
Right.
they sort of go into a,
Banging.
that's one way to put it, yeah, they go into a bit of a reverie and start behaving like people who are possessed, yeah, and this goes on
Right.
for about an hour and a half or so before they slowly come back to their senses when the music dies down and the crescendo dies down. So I actually
Nice.
saw six women go into a trance when I was there, and it was quite a freaky experience. It was the first time I was attending one of these. Yeah, it's highly recommend it.
So, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about brands and branding, and this thought process was triggered by the recent video that went viral, which was about the Birkin bag and the cost of making a Birkin bag. And I think there was someone from China who put out this video about how something similar to a Birkin bag can be made in China for much cheaper, and he shows how it has all the accoutrements and the craftsmanship that goes into a Birkin bag, except maybe for the actual label that goes on a Birkin bag. This, of course, was triggered by Donald Trump and his tariff wars. So now suddenly buying things, there are random tariffs that are imposed. So it becomes tougher and more expensive to buy imported goods in America. And so there are entrepreneurs who are jumping on the train saying there are cheaper ways to get access to great things. And as with odd things that happen on Twitter, you have protagonists who get involved in these events that go viral and become big. So the menswear guy, right? That's his thing. Yeah. So Dye Workwear, Derek Guy, the menswear guy, basically jumped on and tried to explain why that person was wrong and how it's not so easy to make a high quality Birkin bag, because a lot of craftsmanship, French craftsmanship, goes into the making of Birkin bag. Tell us more about this, Tony. You're the one who shared this video with me, and I'm sure you have deep thoughts on this matter. But that is the overall background, and based on which we're going to talk about brands and living in a world of brands.
Yeah. The wonderful takeaway here is that we are recording on 24th of April. It should strike our listeners and us also when we actually thought of doing this episode, when tariffs were still in the news cycle and people were talking about things like China and all of that. Since then, I believe 6 women have been to space and come back. JD Vance has been on a tour where he's allegedly killed the Pope, and several other things have unfolded.
Indeed.
Yet we are still stuck here holding the bag, as it were. I mean, there are 2 or 3 aspects to this probably, and why we've left it at the generic level of brand is because hopefully we can find layers here that are not just restricted to the bag per se, right? But the idea of what it means to pay for something, and not necessarily products or even services or experiences, but probably Nitin Sundar, as a craver for elite institutions in India, maybe, elite institutions and education and all of that as well, right? Yeah, but the trigger, like you said, was this guy posting this. And there were a bunch of TikTok videos where basically people in China were posting stuff saying, buy direct. On Instagram, 2 days later, Washington Post, or you know how they have news in Instagram posts, right? Except this one said, do not buy directly from producers in China. This is why. And then they gave 4 reasons. And the first comment is, this article has been endorsed by Jeff Bezos, who owns this freaking paper, right? Completely sort of counterpoint.
Very neutral view.
Very neutral view, right? Like no vested interest of any kind. So what it was that basically, obviously, the way stuff is made, if you just look at the raw material cost, etc., it'll never match up to the actual price of the bag, right? I think the specific video was talking about how it retails for, I think, $38,000, whereas based on his sort of thing that he's talking about, everything put together, you should be able to buy it for $1,450. So essentially, you can buy, 20-25 bags with that same budget that you would otherwise have. Right?
By the way, to be clear also, $1,450 itself is not a small amount of money, right?
Correct.
So actually the way he is allocated, and it's an interesting video, the way he's allocated the cost to the various components of, inputs that go into the bag is actually quite, it's not like he's tried to cut corners and, said that, oh, this bag is only worth like $70 and you're paying, $38,000. So 15. Yeah.
This is the brilliant part, because Tanner Leatherstein, apparently, this is an influencer who's endorsed by the workwear guy, menswear guy, Derek guy, basically came into this discussion. And apparently he is a man who dispels notions of how expensive things are by actually going into this video. He was on vacation somewhere. He's holding a baby in his hand. But this was peak news cycle that he had to record a video while the baby is in his hand. And he breaks down the video to say, actually, you know what? This guy is not really being completely honest. It costs only $500. Right? So, Nitin, I think one aspect of why that video appealed to us was he did something called Goldilocks pricing, right? He put it at $1,450, which really made it feel like, okay, maybe it's not like completely wrong, right? Like it's nicely sandwiched in between. It's not $500, which seems like chumchy compared to $30. It's $1,450. That's a reasonably specific enough amount for me to sort of want it.
And a respectable enough amount. So then you're thinking, okay, maybe this bag has something more than just the label. So maybe it's actually worth buying. It's actually also typical Chinese entrepreneurship, right? Like, yes, I'm going to give you a great deal, But in the process, I'm also going to make 100% profit, and that's where everyone ends up going happy at the end of the day.
He didn't say like 1449 or one of those things, right? It's not
Bata.
like it's not like
Bata
bata
pricing.
pricing. None of those. It's like 1450, a round number, but arrived at with great calculation, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. And therefore buy this, right? Now, the end part of Tanner Leatherstein's video was what I found interesting, where he's saying that, if you can sort of, obviously China has tremendous advantage in manufacturing, doubtless, and also it can sort of source parts of the supply chain, whether it's the leather or the zipper or the stainless steel or whatever goes into this. And there are some, I don't know, 36 unique different pieces of leather that goes into a Kelly or a Birkin bag or something, all of which are handcrafted. And China also has apparently the craftsman. His point is, why don't you freaking make an original brand yourself and start
Yeah.
retailing for more, right? Like, why does
Yeah.
that not happen? Right. And I
Yeah.
think that is what sort of triggered the origin of where we wanted to make this a podcast episode. So
Yeah.
realistically, what we're asking is, yes, if you can do it, why not do it in a branded way rather than being a cheap knockoff of or a knockoff of something that has spent time and years being created, right? And a segue from our last episode, essentially where we said, is there a value in artists' IP per se, right? Because essentially the Birkin or the Kelly or any of these is the IP of the brand that owns it, Hermes, and they also speak about how they've spent years handcrafting this. They've told a story, they've built a brand. Do any of these things matter, or is a bag just a bag because of what it's made out of, right? That's the broad contours of what we'll get into.
Yeah, from snake stories to snake oil salesman, from herpes to Hermes, we make the transition as we go into a
Where
topic.
does herpes fit in there?
Herpetology, the story of snakes. Come on, man. Get with it. Okay, all right. But firstly, we should not let this pass. Like Tanner Leatherstein, right, is
Correct.
the pseudonym of a guy who is apparently an expert on all matters leather. Right. You could say that he cannot hide behind his pseudonym. When it
He's
comes to
got skin in the game. Yeah.
He's got skin in the game. Yeah, indeed. Firstly, yeah, so the company that makes these bags is Hermes. And if you look at the Derek guy's explanation on why it costs so much to make this bag, he of course talks about, the stitching technique, which is, I don't know, explains there's a 4-type stitch, which is like patented by Hermes, and it's something that they launched. And if you stitch leather in that way, then it would not, even if one knot comes off, the whole thing won't rip away. It'll still hold and endure. Then he talks about the finish, the polish, this, that, and the other. But the one point that he makes, which really makes a difference to the price of this bag, or the big cost element over here, is that these bags are made in apparently a French factory. By French artisans who have been trained over the years, right, in the ancient mystique practices that have passed down from one generation to other of French artisans who work in the Hermes factory in France. Which is all a simple way of saying the cost of living in France is high. The cost of the amount of money you need to pay to have a factory in France and employ French artisans to get something done is significantly higher than what it would be in China, right? If you really look at the way China is, no rocket science here, but if you look at the way China has cracked this whole manufacturing game over the years, it's obviously they have the space and they've had the sort of ambition to build mega factories, and they also have a lot of land, right? The government is also behind this for them, and they managed to get a lot of cheap land and all the best machinery in the world. But they also have people who are willing to do this work, extremely skilled people, or you could even say maybe they're able to throw more people at this kind of work than most other parts in the world, and they're able to work for much lower wages. They work for a Chinese wage rather than a French wage. And that's where really the arbitrage is, right? The cross stitching and the quality of zips and all of that it's just window dressing. Like all of that is obviously available anywhere in the world once you have it. Yes, you could talk about IP and art, right? And yeah, sure, if Hermes sort of came up with the whole technique to come up with the 4-way cross stitch, whatever that is, and that is being copied, then that's another moral discussion, which, like you said, stems from our previous episode. But that's where really the arbitrage is. The arbitrage is in the fact that you're able to mass produce this at a much, much smaller cost. And while I don't know, so the specific example of Hermes, which Derek Guy's point was that it is made in France and hence it is expensive. This is actually not true for most of the great branded products or the great brands now, right?
Baked into the assumption of what you're saying is that the pricing has to be dependent on the cost, right? Which we very clearly know it is not, especially for luxury products, but even otherwise. And I think it was on this podcast only when I had made the allusion to what good leather is, right? And what genuine leather means. Genuine leather just means it has like some amount of leather in it, like 1 or 2%,
Yes.
right? And it doesn't, it's not even like, it's the worst version. It's grade 4 of what leather can be, right? Like, and apparently, I think full grain leather is the best, and then top grain, and then, basically genuine leather or some of those things, right? So
Yeah.
it's not even like, first you need to be knowledgeable about what goes into it. The second thing that I mentioned was when I was working for a footwear company as part of a college project. I had basically asked them, look, why are you pricing your products based on, and their pricing was based on what material is used to make the footwear. Right? And basically, they were talking about this is what it costs, this is made of PUC, and that's how they advertise also, right? And this is what it. So that's a cost plus model, which really, I mean, it's only at the bottom of the sort of pyramid that you go with that model. So
Yeah.
my recommendation to them was to, for their leather thing, to brand it as Antonio Milani, like I
Correct.
said last time, which because Saint Sebastian hails from Milan, and Tony Sebastian was what I was really going for. But the idea being, if you sort of give the indication that it comes from Italy and Italian leather, you can obviously charge a premium. Right.
Yeah.
So, in no way, shape, or form is any of the things that we buy, given where we are in the consumerist space of things, dependent on the actual cost of raw material or the effort that goes into it, right? Which is what separates a product from a brand, right? And I think that's the difference that we are trying to sort of tease out. What makes a brand? Obviously, multiplicity of things, but in this specific instance, obviously, the Hermes story is part of it, right? And when you carry a Birkin or a Kelly, there is a story that you're buying into, and it's not the same if you just buy any other bag, even if it's made with the same material and copies the same sort of style.
Yeah. Now, this is true. Cost plus pricing, of course, doesn't really work unless except for the cheapest of cheap things. Which is why, even in the example, the Chinese guy who breaks down the cost ends up with a cost that gives him 100% margin. Right? It doesn't give him
Correct.
a 25,000% margin, which is what the actual Amaze product sells for. But even he's going for 100% margin there. So technically, it's not cost plus even there. Right? It all boils down. I know this is getting too technical, but we know about
Why?
Veblen
No,
goods, and Giffen
please
goods.
get technical.
Veblen goods are basically
Yeah.
products that you buy or things that you buy which denote luxury and status
Yeah.
rather than just the utilitarian value of what you're purchasing it for. And examples would be your luxury handbags, it would be expensive watches, it would be
And
yachts,
the
things
idea
like that.
being that it has a value because it is priced so high. So not too many people
Yes,
can have it. Which
correct,
is why
exactly.
I called Leftover Lasagna the ultra luxury podcast, because it's not something everyone can have. And the price you pay is so high because you won't get it anywhere else. Right? Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah, we don't even do weekly drops anymore. We are so exclusive that you'll have to wait a
correct.
couple of weeks extra to
Correct.
get to our next
Correct.
episode. You never know when you'll get it. You just be ready all the time. It's like, yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
And then you have at the other end of the spectrum, things that are basically sold at cost, which is the absolute essentials, right? Like food, bread, for instance, or potatoes. These are the standard examples that are sort of parroted out.
But if you slap on the term organic to a vegetable, you can automatically increase its price, right? I think two things that can add on price is either you slap on the word organic or you slap on the phrase wedding, right? Like photography, maybe
Oh,
10,000. Wedding photography immediately is like 1 lakh, right? For the same quantum of
amazing.
effort.
Yeah.
Dress versus wedding dress, ring versus wedding ring. Any of these things.
Just thinking bells versus wedding bells.
Why? Why are you buying bells, Dan? To repel snakes, is it?
No, so one way to make things more expensive is to add the word organic to them. The other way to make them expensive is to actually have organic marketing around them, which is where your brand starts talking for itself, and then you're able to charge a premium for the brand. Like I said,
Correct.
the Hermes example is very specific because Derek Guy insists that the cost, or rather the value, comes from the fact that French artisans make it in France and all of that. But
Yeah.
most big brands that are even operating in the supposedly Veblen space have realized that craftsmanship and all of that bad meja, we will go to China, we'll figure out ways to make things cheaper by taking advantage of the great manufacturing capability and manpower strength that China has got. And a good example of
Correct.
that is, of course, the Apple iPhone itself, right? Now, most interesting thing about the iPhone is a few years back, not even few, maybe 10 years, 15 years back, maybe you could have argued that the Apple iPhone was a Veblen good. But now,
Yeah.
every other person has the not just the Apple phone. Of course, in India it's a bit different because it's a big Android market, but even the Apple Watch, right? Like if you look at people now, I think we spoke about this in one of our earlier episodes. Everybody is wearing that same, that square shaped dial with a few circles and logos and the bright sort of flashy LCD light popping out of it, or LED light, whatever that AMOLED display that's popping out of it. So everyone's wearing an Apple Watch. So is it
Yeah.
a Veblen good itself anymore? Maybe it's not, and because of the fact that it has
No,
become
it's
so
not.
ubiquitous and mass
Yeah.
manufactured, so it's not, of course. So
See, I mean, necessarily the phone and maybe even like a smartwatch today has become a utilitarian device, right? So it's not in the space of
yeah.
just that brand value anymore.
So that's my question, right? You would imagine mostly it's the other way around, right? Like something like a Birkin bag, for instance. Its value and its sort of the journey is always that you start as a certain story, and then the aura around that story only keeps increasing over a period of time. So if you're a brand that has cracked it, you're likely going further up and becoming more and more prohibitively luxurious, right? Like the Apple iPhone, on the other hand, without dropping quality or anything, the ubiquity has gone up so much that
Correct.
it is not really a luxury good anymore, right? And isn't that
Yeah.
opposite? No,
But
not
I don't
opposite.
think
Isn't
it
that
was their
antithetical?
intent to.
Yeah,
It wasn't to create an luxury brand. No? I mean, if you look at the market share of
it
Apple
wasn't.
in the
Yeah.
US, it's probably it's for everyone in that sense, right? I don't think it's inclusive like Delhi Capitals, but I don't think it was ever their intent to be a luxury
It
brand,
wasn't.
as opposed to some of these other things, right? Because essentially a Miss bag or whatever, or let's say what is it, Philippe Patek watch.
Patek
Some of these
Philippe.
things are Patek Philippe, are supposed to be part of the body real estate to signal a certain thing about yourself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, the iPhone was that for some time, probably in India because of the way the market is, but generally, I don't think that's what it is. But Nitin, I would like to sort of call this out to say you are probably the most brand agnostic person that exists, right? To a certain degree, because not only are you blind about which brand to use, you are blind about the difference between the brands that you own as well, right? So let's just illustrate this with an example of Nitin's tweet on Vishu, April 14th. The tweet says, "No, it wasn't a fashion statement or anything." And we can see two beautiful legs of Nitin Sundar. One wearing a Nike sneaker and the other wearing an Adidas sneaker. Nitin, elaborate. What the fuck is going on?
Okay. I can explain. I don't know if it'll make sense, but I can
Yeah,
explain.
you must.
Yeah.
You must.
So everything Tony said initially is true, right? Like I've tended to sort of become very skeptical about brands, especially in the last few years, and I tend to sort of stick to the few things that work for me. And generally, when I buy stuff, specifically clothes, I try and buy clothes that don't have any visible branding on them, right? As far as possible. It's hard at my price point because I'm not even willing to spend too much money. But that's a different story. I had a pair of Nike sneakers. I have a pair of Nike sneakers, which I bought, I think, in 2018. And those buggers just don't give up, right? So I've run around thousands of kilometers in those shoes, but they're still holding up fine. I think sometime around 1.5 years back, I thought one of the soles of I think my left or right sole of the Nike shoe was giving way. So I thought it's time to replace it. So during end of year sale in Dubai, I went and bought another pair of sneakers, which were a very similar looking black and white Adidas sneakers, as you can see in that pic. And but the Nike sneakers, it was actually a false alarm that the sole has continued to hold up. I still get the air pop, that you get from the sole of that particular design of
Is
Nike.
it ASMR?
It's C4BR. Yeah, so it still works fine. So what I do now is I interchangeably wear the two pairs of shoes because I have them. I'm really irritated because it takes a lot of real estate in my space, right? I have a very small shoe cupboard and I need to find a way to stash two different pairs of sneakers which are basically performing the same role. I can't really tell the difference between the two, as you can see. So on this particular day when I was going to the gym, I was running a little late, so I was very quickly trying to put on my shoes and get out of the house. And I took the left shoe and then the right shoe and I wore it, and then I left to the gym. I went to the gym and I think we were the process of stretching or something when you put your feet in front of you, one of those stretches, and you bend over. And then I looked down and I realized that I have worn mismatched shoes. So I have Nike on one foot and Adidas on the other. Thankfully, this
So
was
did you
one of those.
continue with the workout or did you go back and change?
So this was a group workout, and they actually penalize you if you don't show up, or if you actually they don't penalize you if you leave after you come, but they penalize you if you don't show up, and it's a specific 50-minute slot during which the workout happens, right? And it happens inside thankfully a very dark room, and this was not a very crowded class, so we didn't have too many people that day. So I thought, you know what, if I couldn't tell the difference in bright daylight where I was wearing these shoes, maybe inside this dark room nobody will notice. I actually went through with the workout, and there's another picture that I took at the end of the workout after everyone sort of emptied out of that room, and the picture that you shared also was taken afterwards. So yeah, literally Nike, Adidas, right? There are big brand
They're all
stories
the
behind
same.
these brands. They're all broadly the same. They're made in the same factory, and this is of
But
course,
you can't
Yeah, go
can't move on from this left shoe right shoe thing as a Malayali without talking about the Japanese factory, right? So like one of the topics that you would always get growing up as a kid in Kerala, one of the topics for elocution or debate or one of these things would be, are strikes necessary, right? Because
Oh.
like we are famously led of strikes.
Yes.
And the example that always comes up is the Japanese shoe factory, where when they are striking, they don't stop production, right? Instead, they only make left shoes for a period of time.
Yeah.
Then once the strike is over, they make right shoes, so you
Yeah.
match the production quality. But I'm sure it's like a fake thing, right? There is no factory where, I'm guessing both of them get made simultaneously, right? It's not like
Yeah.
left shoe now, right shoe later.
Actually, yeah, we should check this. This could be urban legend for all you know. But this would have worked perfectly fine for me because I have 2 left feet. Yeah. Get them at a discount. Nobody else wants these, but can I have 3 pairs, please?
This is how the dad used to go out in the Dassler household. On one foot he would wear Adidas, one foot he would wear Puma, right? Because both are brothers, Adolf Dassler, Adi Dassler, and Rudolf Dassler, who started Puma. So the dad would wear Puma on one foot and Adidas on the other foot. I'm guessing.
Yeah. One last point on that manufacturing thing, right? So, in my time at when I used to work at Myntra, one of the category folks at Myntra who was in charge of accessories, I visited factories in China where products were getting manufactured. I believe this
So
was
you
around
went to
the
China?
I didn't go. He went. He told me the story.
Okay, go.
This was around the time you had these 2 or 3 brands which continue to be quite popular, right? Bolt, all these earphone brands that suddenly popped in India.
Yeah.
Which are extremely much cheaper than your Sennheisers and Skull Candy or Bose, of course, which is needlessly overpriced. And all these other foreign brands. He told me that at least this is what he claims to have seen in the Chinese marketplace and the Chinese factories, that these are all adjacent buildings next to each other with the same sort of factory lines, the same sort of workers, and they're all making exactly the same product. And it's just that the branding gets sort of chapad at the end. And so what gets branded as a Bolt or gets branded as a boat is different. And by the way, these Indian brands are also made in China, or at least were made in China.
Yeah.
I don't know what the deal is now. And there are other more expensive, brands that sell at 10x premium, like Sennheiser, for instance, whose brand logo I don't know if Sennheiser is the actual example, and I don't want to get sued by them. Not that I have anything to give them, but the more expensive brands are basically the exact same product.
Bold of you to assume they're listening. It's okay.
They are Sennheiser after all, so they probably are
Unless they have the sixth Sennheiser. Sixth Sen.
Please focus on making noise cancelling earphones and don't do podcast cancelling is all I would ask for. But yeah, so much for brand, and this is true for your Nikes and Adidas and all of these also. I'm sure they have like, proprietary, that extra layer of foam, that thinness that fit the toe box and whatever. But ultimately, these are all formulae that get fed to China where the manufacturing happens en masse, cheap.
Yeah, but I mean, see, the difference being, at least, I mean, we grew up in an era, you and I, Nitin, where for both of us, I would assume like Nike and Adidas were aspirational brands at one point, right?
Yeah.
Like, growing up where we grew up, it was not like we could afford any of these, right? That's not the case anymore. But so much so that you would have at some point bought like one of those Adibas or Nice or one of those like apparent knockoffs of this, right? Just to belong. So there is a difference between sort of just the utility of it and sort of wanting to signal to others that I am this kind of person, right? Who is behind just do it, that, this, and the other, right?
I'll try and pull out pictures, but I once had this green T-shirt which said, just like Puma, it would say tuna, and instead of the prancing puma, there would be a fish tuna.
Yeah.
Huge
No, but
branding.
that's parody, right? Like
Of course,
that's
yeah.
different from a
I did
knockoff.
only that. I never wore an Adibus for the record. Let me state it. I went straight from Bata to tuna. So there you go.
Nice. Yeah. 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 The point being that obviously, like there are many definitions of a brand, but just on the luxury side of things, right? Obviously, before we move into other things, on the luxury side of things, I guess the most egregious example is diamonds, right? Diamonds inherently have no value at all, unlike maybe gold, especially right now, when the price of gold are soaring. Malayalis across the world are happy, but diamonds inherently have no value, right? Like once you sort of buy it, you can't sell it back. It's not even like there is a difference between lab made diamonds versus real diamonds, except maybe the blood in the supply chain or whatever.
Why
And
can't you resell diamonds? May I know?
you can, I don't think you get the same value, right? Like, I doubt
Really?
it.
I don't know this.
Search. Let's do it. Can you resell diamonds?
Are they like cars? Do they lose value as soon as they leave the showroom?
Expect to receive a resale value of 20 to 50% of the original cost,
My
according
goodness,
to
why?
Joy Alucas. Exactly as I'm saying. They don't have resale value. It's the biggest scam in the entirety of human existence.
But that is
Is
just
that
illogical human behavior, no? If gold can be resold, I don't understand why diamonds cannot be. Because they also come certified and
because
everything, right? So,
diamonds have no value. What is I mean, the reason gold is what it is that it has always been a store of value, right? And it's a store of value that you can carry out of the house while wearing it on your person as a woman who is married out of the household because of practices like dowry, etc. Right. On that note, please watch Ponman Malayalam movie on Geo
oh,
Hotstar.
yeah. What a beautiful film. No, but that same thing
But it's
applies to
not. It's
diamond,
not a
no. It's
store of
equally rare.
value, dude. Who is buying it? But it's not rare. The
It is
rarity
rare.
of diamond. No, it is an artificial shortage that you've created.
Fair.
Huh? Yeah. So the entirety of like the diamond thing is fully based on marketing, right? And De Beers has no right to exist as it does. So much so that their marketing right now is that only real diamonds last forever, right? If you are a dad who loves their daughter, really, you have to buy a real diamond because it has inherently no value. The other marketing scam around diamonds is that it is the sign of love, right? And you have to spend 3 full months of salary to buy a diamond. That is the idea behind whatever it is. And these have become social tropes, right? There is no value at all to a diamond, right? Or even if you have to look at some sort of artificial crystal based things, like the first thing that will come to your mind is Swarovski. And I don't think it is, again, sort of like value for cost as much as it is a value for something blingy that is also recognizable by someone else. Right?
Yeah.
So, which is why, like diamonds, you have to invent all of this shit like cut, color, clarity, caratage, and all, as if you can lab make diamonds that are much better looking and have all of the same chemical properties, except it doesn't have a story. Neither does a diamond because it's a terrible story, right? So, I mean, I think at one end it's always been like that, which probably brings us to the question around what you wanted to talk about: elite institutions in India. And when I said they have no inherent value except the tag of an IMA is what you seek purely because of the low admission rate, right? In that sense,
Yeah.
it is the ultimate luxury good in India is the tag of, okay, at least when we were growing up, an IIT and an IIM, right? Now that there are, I don't know, 30, 50 IITs and IIMs, the way you signal that value is by saying IMA as opposed to, I don't know, IIM. There's one in Mumbai also. There is an IIT Dharwad. Did you know this?
Yeah, yeah.
Not Harvard.
There's an IIM Ahmedabad Dubai campus that is now in the works. So we're soon going to have an IMA closer
Exactly.
to home. Yeah.
Of course, there's Bits Pilani, Goa,
Bits
Bits
Pilani,
Pilani, Dubai.
Yeah. It's called Bits Pilani Dubai campus, by the way, because the Pilani
It's
is
also
an
called Bits
important
Pilani,
part
Goa
of
campus. Yeah,
correct. Because the Pilani is an important part of the
yeah, because
branding.
there is also BIT Mesra, I suppose,
Bit
which
Mesra.
is what they're trying to. Yeah.
They created a Mesra by
So
coming
tell
up with a
us
similar
about this
branding.
other tweet storm that you did around this nonsense about India needs many more elite institutions. It needs no such thing, man. It's just like
Rubbish.
branding and eyewash. Yeah.
No. No, you're talking about two different things. I agree with you. It is branding and eyewash.
Yeah.
So, simple example or simple counter example, right? So, you recently were involved with Australia, where you were trying to potentially maybe emigrate to Australia, and
Involved with Australia. In a situationship with
In a
Australia.
situation, yeah, that's exactly what it was. Like, I had the fortune of visiting Australia as well late last
Yeah.
year, and had the chance to meet and speak to a few people. I had a couple of friends who were living in Australia, etc., and they were telling us about the Australian
Name and
way of.
shame, da. Hang.
Not Hank. This was in Hank.
Oh, you said friends. I'm sorry. Okay.
This podcast is about Hank after all. No, so yeah, no, not our very wise chancellor. I'm talking
Not
about
Mohan
some other
Krishnamurthy.
friends. Yeah. So in Australia, typically kids, right, when they complete their schooling, they go to university. They don't actually typically travel for. You would imagine that there are probably two or three elite institutions in Australia which kids aspire to go to, maybe in the big cities, right? And one of Australia's big problems is that they have, while being a massive continent, they only have two big cities where 60% of the country slash continent's population. I'm just using continent loosely because New Zealand doesn't really count. They have like sheep, like we know famously.
Correct.
So you would imagine that there are probably two or three big elite institutions that people from the hinterland, from your Tasmania or from Queensland, want to go and study in. Yeah, I know, what else do you say? But that's not the case apparently, and kids typically don't even leave home when they go to university, because there are universities everywhere in your own state, in your own city, and they're all very, very good, right? In terms of quality of education that they offer, they are not in any way, shape, or form inferior in terms of the quality of faculty or the quality of cutting edge, whatever, education, technology, let's say branding. But the point is, the best sort of branding is when you actually don't need the branding at all, right? It is almost immaterial which university you went to for those kids, as long as you went to university, right? And that's because university education is plentifully easily available and accessible to everyone,
No,
everywhere.
it's also because the Australian dream is very different from the Indian dream. Right? The Australian dream is irrespective of whether you're a tradie or a nurse or a chef or an engineer, you ultimately end up earning similarish kind of dollar value. Right? There is not
Ah,
much difference.
no,
You're
that's
prioritizing for, let's say, quality of life over actual income in itself. The Indian dream is very different. Is that your parents were middle class, but you will necessarily be like one of these elite top people. And the way to get there is obviously to fight this scarcity battle, right? As opposed to an
correct. So
abundance mindset where you are coming from saying this much is enough, right? And to get to this much, I don't have to go to another city or state to study in another university because the opportunities are pretty much the same. Whereas in India, there is an asymmetry in both the seeming number of opportunities and the number of people who are fighting for those few positions, right? And
correct.
and
So
that's
what
where
you're
the difference
explaining,
comes in.
what you call as the dream, you're making it sound as if Indians are choosing this because that is what they want to aspire for, something higher, right? It's not a dream. It is what the system has bestowed upon the people. And the only way
Correct.
to get ahead in life in India, unfortunately, is that you fight for everything
No,
against a.
that's the point that I'm trying to make is that this is a pure branding exercise, right? And like there are obviously many definitions of a brand, but probably from two of the easily accessible definitions, a brand is a promise and a brand is a shortcut to a purchase decision, right? So when you wanted to start running and you wanted to buy a shoe, or I did, I'd probably go for a Nike and an Adidas because they've spent years trying to
I
tell
go
me the
for a
story
Nike
of
ad and Adidas.
and an Adidas. Because they've spent years trying to tell me the story of why it makes you elite, why you can be like I don't know, like Rafael
Michael
Nadal
Jordan.
or Roger
Yeah.
Federer or Michael Jordan. Yeah, obviously Michael Jordan, right? And immediately you're like, this is the thing that I want to do, and you're going and buying it, right? That's the shortcut to a purchase, which is also why it is priced higher. And the same is true in the Indian education system, right? Like what does IMA stand for, or what does IMK stand for? Is just that there is a quality that is being assured by saying we have very stringent entrance policies that only the top cream of the cream makes it here, and therefore why waste your time as a company going across the country searching for people while you can just select from the cream here and pay a little higher premium, right? And that's what everyone's trying to break into. I am definitely saying there is no inherent change that has come about in you just because you went to an IMA as opposed to if you had studied MBA in Chennai for that matter, right? Except probably the people you were exposed to and the networks you had. It is a pure play branding exercise. There is nothing that the institution adds to you. And at the same time, the first company you make it in is not necessarily the last, right? So if you have an inherent quality and if you did that, in the long run, you'd probably end up in the same place, right? But the whole point is everyone wants that, I don't know, 1 crore salary package straight out of campus, and the only campuses that provide it have a very, very stringent entrance criteria. And therefore, you fight for the brand and the tag and nothing to do with what the actual inputs from that place itself is. That's the point I'm making.
We are saying the same thing, except we're saying it in different ways. I'll be the last person to claim that anything that goes on in any B school is of any inherent value to anybody, anything more than signaling, right? There's nothing that happens there. And it's especially true for someone like me who studied in the, actually the pre-iPhone era. The iPhone actually launched, smartphones launched, just as I was finishing my MBA. And social media really took off around the time when I was finishing my MBA. So anything that happened before that is completely irrelevant to the world in which we have lived in the last 15 years. Forget the world that we have been living in the last couple of years, right? Which is the world of Gen AI and everything else. So I don't think it's of any value or any inherent value other than signaling. But what I was trying to say is it's sad that the scarcity mindset is sort of become so ingrained in us that we have taken it as a, almost the way you put it, we've taken it as a dream to try and break out of that, of the scarcity constraints imposed on us. It is because most people don't realize that this is not how the best functioning parts of the world function, right? If you take the Nordic countries, for example, where or even I know America is a very bad example, so I'll stick to Europe and to the Nordic countries where state provides education, right? Like even at a school level, and really, I mean, I know this is again steering very, very far away from where this podcast is about, but if you want to really create impact and change, you need to have free and easily accessible high quality education at the lowest level.
In solution mode.
Right.
No, but
hey, you asked me to talk about that.
No, but I'm not asking you to talk about the solution. I'm asking you to speak to the topic. If you had gone to a better institution, probably your comprehension skills would have been better, and you could stay on point longer.
But the first thing that happens, right, when you go to IIM Ahmedabad is there is this store, and the first day you go in with your parents because they also want to come to this place and see what it is and to set you up there and all of that, right? So you go, you do your registration process, you're getting used to the place, you're already buzzing, right? You dreamt all your life, or at least for a couple of years or whatever, to get here and everything. So there is this one store which is like the entree shop, they used to call it, where they used to sell branded merchandise like coffee mugs and this and that from IIM Ahmedabad. And lots of people on those first days would actually go and buy the IMA t-shirt, right, which you can only get in there. You know what the IMA t-shirt says? I don't know if they still have this t-shirt, but it was there back then and it was very popular. It actually says branded for life.
Correct.
Yeah.
This is true.
Yeah, which, while initially when you get that t-shirt and you see that t-shirt, you get goosebumps because you're also a young 20-something who is, extremely gullible and, looking at the world and think, oh, I have arrived and all of that. But it is the most immature tagline you can slap on a university t-shirt if you think about it. It says branded for life. And God, like the levels of self-awareness or lack of it. Yeah.
This is where I disagree on 2 counts, right? One is...
With what? What is there to disagree here?
Let me give you...
I disagree with your disagreement. No, you disagreeably make your point.
This is where I disagree on 2 counts, right? One is obviously by virtue of circumstance and like sheer serendipity, we happen to be on an eclectic WhatsApp group where people come from a diversity of situations. I mean, not the level really. Of contextually, right?
For the record, this is a group of 50-something
men. Can I finish?
No, wait. Our listeners should understand that we are...
There are 50 people.
The egalitarian, eclectic world that Tony is talking about is 49 now, by the way. That Tony is talking about.
Who left? Yes. This episode is about Hank. Okay.
These 49 people are basically 47 of them are men in their 30s.
No, it's not 40. Come on.
Yeah, okay. 46 of them. Okay, one of them is a bot. But 46 of them are men in their 30s, out of which about 40 MBAs, out of which about 25 are Tony's classmates from IIM Kozhikode. And all of these are cricket fans. And what else? 20 of them are product managers. This is your extremely eclectic group that Tony is talking about, guys, just for the record.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. So, diverse in a limited context.
And they're all cricket fans. Did I forget to tell you? Talk about cricket ad nauseum.
as you move up in life, you self-select into groups that are based on the institutions that you go to, which is colleges, and then you self-select based on the company that you work for, the corporate culture, and then you self-select based on the gated communities that you're a part of, and the whatever country clubs, etc. Which means that there is a degree of sameness that creeps in. In that context, is a diverse group in the sense that there are always people, at least I don't know, a handful of them who have this inherent question that are non-MBAs allowed in this group, right? And you and I laugh it off as the silliest assertion that someone can make, that like having an MBA has some value, right? But the point is, we are able to make that sort of distinction by virtue of having gone through it, right? And if you hadn't gone through it, you probably would have had the same thing to say, there is something elite or distinct about, I like how I'm putting IMK on the same level as IMA, but that's not the point.
Fucking
Is
rubbish.
that there is, yeah, I know it is rubbish, right? But that's not the same for someone who's not been through it, right? And therefore there is
No, I'm saying it is rubbish that you're putting IMK on the same level as IMA.
Please, if you are the gold standard of IMA, I'm sorry to say, why there are 25 of my IMK mates in that group is testament to the fact that there is no such. But the point is that we know inherently that there is no value, right? And like you're, at least in that group, you are judged by the
Cat scores.
quality of the points you make, or how silly you can be while making the point you make, where there is no age bar, like you can be whatever age you are, or you can be whatever distinction you are from, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. That is one part, right? And there is significantly a difference between people who've been through it versus people who've not been through it, right? And immediately there is a tag that is attached to you based on where you're from, whether you like it or not. And people do aspire to it, right? And rightly so. I don't think it's a bad thing. Second part, when you say branded for life,
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I don't think aspiration is a bad thing at all, right? That's not what I'm saying. And I think as long as you are living in the Indian system, the only way out, sadly, continues to remain that you need to aspire for these brands.
I disagree that it's the only way out, right? Because why?
It's so hard.
You're saying if you don't do an MBA, then you won't reach the same level as someone. That's not true at all, right? Like it varies. Like it doesn't really matter. Like
I didn't say you need an MBA, but people are always looking to try and get that, whatever that branding certification might be, right? It's it could be a place you go, it's the place you work for, the place you studied, whatever that may be, because
but that's not the only way out, is the only thing that I'm saying, right? You can
99 out of 100 ways out are that way. So yeah, sure.
Now you're like disregarding your own point, but okay.
Where? Which point?
So what is your point? Is that elite institutions make elite people?
No, that's not what I said. But brands make people.
Correct. So then branded for life, you are refuting that point. No, branded for life is branded for life. And Sidin had this example.
Branded for life is branded for life. I'm just saying the levels of immaturity to come up with a jersey and a university jersey and to flaunt it for so many years, right? It's just so childish. That was my point.
So Sidin, when he was on Simplified, spoke about this, that their commencement address was given by Raghuram Rajan, or he was the person handing out the degrees. And he basically said, look, this piece of paper in your hand, it means that you'll never starve, right? So go follow your dream, do whatever you want. And then Sidin became an author and wrote to Raghuram Rajan, and he said, what is wrong with you? Don't take all this seriously. Please get a real job. Right? No, but the point being that the level of credentialism in India continues to be a thing, right? Which is why branded for life is in fact branded for life. However, that's not the only way to get to where you want to. But also at the same time, the only value of something like that is pure play branding.
Yeah, we are at a yes. I'm not disagreeing with anything that you said, by the way. No, you're disagreeing with me. I don't know what you're disagreeing with also.
No. So the point, I think your tweet was around India needs thousands of elite institutions. I'm saying there can never be such a thing, because you always find a way to one up and say that
elite institution is a heuristic. Okay, it's a concept. What I mean is India needs hundreds of big cities. Now, of course, you cannot manufacture big cities out of the wazoo. Right? I know that. The point is there is a massive supply-demand mismatch in India, and nobody is actually trying to solve for that. Right? It's not systemically, we have not solved for it. Opportunities have not gone up. We have not gone through the China model, right, where we actually made manufacturing jobs.
So you're saying India needs more avenues for employment.
More of everything, exactly. Yeah,
so it doesn't need
and factories to get people ready for that, right? And to get factories ready for people for them, right? And what are institutions? They're not factories. What is a college if not a factory for people, right? Who can come out and become functioning members of society that can proceed upwards in life.
No, one second. First of all, we are not creating functioning members of society in any
That
way.
is also
shape, or
true.
form, right?
That is also
like,
true.
what the hell? What is this assertion? Like, the way we came out of engineering college, you're not fit to be part of any society or employment at all.
Imagine,
Which is why,
imagine you land up in a job at Infosys, which is like the absolute,
Correct.
like literally,
Correct.
anyone should be able to do that job.
Entry to
And
entry.
your engineering degree has not even got you ready for that. So they actually spent 2 months
Correct.
teaching you, this is how you
6
do
months.
code testing.
6 months they put you in Mysore and say, forget everything that you've learned. This is what you need to do to learn, right? So
And
we
this is
don't
for
come
the-
out of
yeah.
any.
Yeah, okay.
No, so the point being that I think this is a different point and a distinct and an important one is that we've spoken about it enough times. Our institutions have nothing to do with education. They only have to do with branding, right? They don't make you ready for
Yes.
life. They don't make you ready for discourse. They don't
Yes.
widen your perspective. None of
Yes.
these things, right? If they do, it is by sheer dint of accident and serendipity. There is nothing inherently in the institution that does this, as opposed
Yes.
to probably, hopefully, maybe institutions abroad where you have a wider perspective of life and you're not focusing on just one metric, which is the CTC
Yes.
you get or branded for life or whatever. And that's an important distinction, right? So when you talk about elite institutions, I don't think you originally meant it. I'm correcting you for you. In the way that there needs to be an assembly line or a factory into employment, you probably meant it in the sense that you need more well-rounded people who are not focused on just that one metric, because
Yes.
it is impossible for everyone to be above average on that one metric, for everyone to be in the top 1%. What you need is a wider perspective of life, which can be brought about by institutions that are well-rounded and not necessarily elite in that sense.
A well-rounded institution is an elite institution. Let's redefine boundaries.
Consistent institutions do well, match-winning institutions do well.
But the ones that combine the two are branded for life.
What are the brands that you swear by?
I don't swear by any brand.
What are the brands that you swear at?
The t-shirts that I generally wear, it's same as you, right? If something works, something fits well and is reasonably durable and not too expensive, then you kind of stick to it. So I discovered Pepe Jeans t-shirts, right, a few years back. I think it was about 5 or 6 years back. And I found that, they actually fit very well. A certain size in their slim fit t-shirt there just fits well, doesn't accentuate the curves I don't want accentuated and so on and so forth. That there's reasonably decent material that lasts well. So then once I discovered those Pepe Jeans t-shirts, and Pepe is a brand that is, I think it's reasonably popular. We used to see the ads on TV, etc. By the way, much like it's called Pepe Jeans London, by the way, right? So like your Peter England and John Miller and all these other fake mudra brands that are, slapped with aspirational European names, I thought Pepe Jeans was also one of those. Only today I realized it's actually a European brand. So this is the reverse, right?
I mean, it was in 1988, it was bought over by 4 people.
Yeah. Who are Indians?
Farooq
funny.
Jamal, Arun Shah, and the other 2 are Nitin and Milan. So now we know why
It was meant to be.
why you have an affinity for this brand, because
Yeah.
you and
Except-
your son are both represented. You are invested. You have skin in the game.
Absolute. And by the way, unlike you, I hate going to a mall. Like going to a mall or trying on clothes
I
is
also
what
don't
hate.
go to a mall
You
out
said-
of
you said-
choice.
No, I go online. I don't know why you're still buying stuff physically in, physical retail and all. I used to buy Pepe Jeans t-shirts on Myntra, right? So like various different cuts of the same thing. Something that doesn't have the branding in your face, because I hate it. And I think I've run out of that entire line of Pepe. Now I need to find new brands. Maybe, I should.
No, but
Cast my
forget
net
what
wide.
you wear, right? Aspirationally, like, what is a brand that you want to own? Like,
To
I don't know,
own.
is it a car or like a bat or like a frisbee? I don't know.
No, absolutely
Golden
nothing.
chain.
Absolutely nothing. So if
Where do your ring go with the choker around your neck?
Oh, it's right here. This is from Temu, man. Temu is the Chinese website. I got 10 of these for like some 15 dirhams or something. No, but these also need to be replaced. Like they fray and stuff. So it's good to have. I've run through 3 of them. I have another 10. So
In
I'm
that
set for
sense,
the
there
next
are
15
zero
years.
brands that you aspire for. Like,
Zero
you never
brands.
ever wanted like a car, a make of car. I don't know, Jaguar
No.
or one of these. Yeah.
No.
I think we are the worst people to be talking about this.
Exactly. There are only three brands that I generally wear, of course. No, when I'm not wearing mismatched shoes, that is. It's usually something from Decathlon or something from Pepe. Or it is Uniqlo. Uniqlo is a brand that I absolutely love. If I have time, I will go and kill
Yeah,
it
but you're not wearing it for the
a
brand. It's not
not
like
for
you
the.
have
In
a
fact, I'm
big
wearing
ass
it because the
Uniqlo.
brand is not ubiquitous at all, and I'm wearing it very for utilitarian reasons because I love the way they
Correct.
fit and feel and the quality. Decathlon, man, Decathlon for life. Brands can go die.
Hey, this is terrible,
They
man.
just
There has
killed
to be
it.
something that is of one second. There has to be something that is, out of this sphere where we're trying to be like really put together stoic people. What is the one thing that you'll irrationally spend on?
Decathlon shorts. I have like multiple pairs, more pairs than I need.
Okay, do you
No, yeah, I don't
do you
irrationally
have a
spend.
fascination for, I don't know, quality whiskey or
No,
alcohol or any of these
I
things?
don't drink. I don't like whiskey. Whiskey is wasted on me. So if I go to a friend's place and they offer me like like high level single malt, I'll be like, "Do you have like cheap Scotch?" Because
Gin.
I try every single gin that's available. I love gin, but there's no
Huh.
brand. I mean, who sticks to a certain brand when it comes to alcohol? You want
I
variety, right?
don't know, man.
In
We're
anything you
trying to find.
consume.
See, we have to try and find your
Yeah.
the chink in your armor. There has to be something, man. Come on.
What do I irrationally spend on? I irrationally spend on playing
Luxury
ultimate
hotels.
frisbee these days. Not my
You
fan.
famously don't like luxury hotels either.
I mean, who
Stuff.
doesn't like a luxury hotel? I wouldn't spend on it though, but yeah. You can put me up in the Marriott every day. I'm not going to
If you're
complain.
giving it to be for free. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Coldplay concert. No. Hey, you're waste there. You've lost the will to live. You're not
Yeah,
fit
waste.
for this capitalist society anymore. Please
Not
leave.
fit. No, on this topic of what is your irrational spend? You also have nothing.
I also have nothing. I don't think so. This is horrible.
Whiskey? No, you're not a whiskey
No,
guy.
da.
You're a vodka fellow.
Yeah, I mean, I would pretty much drink anything. No, there was never a
Yeah.
fast.
On the topic of drinking, right? And this is like the perfect example.
Coffee, chocolates.
I buy the cheapest off-brand coffee and have it with hot water, and it's so nice. Coffee of all the type of snootery or snootiness, coffee snootiness is the one that gets my goat every single time. The people forcing bitter crap down their throat and claiming that whatever. Come on, coffee should be as functional and accessible as everything. But anyway, since we're talking about booze, right? If you think of beer, right, the one thing that comes to everybody's mind is Oktoberfest, right, which is people huddling together in Germany, specifically in Munich, and having those huge 1 liter, 2 liter mugs of beer that they chug. And this happens, Oktoberfest famously happens in September, right? So
September.
that's hard to get to. But so I had the fortune of visiting Munich last year and drinking some of the beer, not in September or October. This was in, I think, July. Yeah, but I was there. And Munich is, of course, known for its beer gardens, right? The whole concept of beer garden originated from Germany, from Munich, which is basically a great open space where you can go to concessionaries and buy your beer, buy
No,
your
you know
food.
why? It was
Yeah.
created because to store beer, right? As in, like, there was only a certain period in time before science became what it is that you could
Ah,
create beer, and to store it, you needed like a something above it which is cool, which is why the beer was below and the garden was built above, and it
oh, I
needed
didn't know
to
this.
sort of give that
Yeah,
cooling,
interesting.
etc. Which is why beer
Interesting.
gardens come to be in the first place. Is that it is protecting the beer below, and if you
Good.
drink on top of it, it is fine.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So, quiz question for you. Can you guess what is the most popular
No,
beer in Munich? Make a wild guess. What do you think is the biggest selling brand of beer in Munich?
Pabst.
There is no brand at all. When you go to a beer garden
It's
in Germany,
the
in
draft.
Munich, you just go and ask for what type of beer you want, right? And they'll give you
Correct.
great beer, right? So you just tell them whether you want, ale or whatever, right? They call it hell. They call lager is called or lager or pilsner. Lager is called hell, Hell, right? That's the German word for
Yeah.
it. You just
Yeah.
tell them whether you want a pilsner, you want stout, you want lager, you want hell, what, and they'll give you the beer, and it'll uniformly be brilliant, right? This is the exact opposite, right? Where you actually don't have brand, but the beer that you get it's of course made in 2 or 3 breweries. And I did a walking tour where I went to one of those and saw there. I forget the name of the popular ones. These are very very famous old school beer houses, right? Where the beer is brewed, but they're not really known for their brand names, and they don't care about their brand name. the actual brand, the actual experience, the proof of the pudding is in the taste that you get when you drink those beer, because they are made with the highest
Proof
quality
of the
water.
pudding.
Proof of the yeah. But literally, nobody cares about the branding of the beer over there, right? So when you say
Obviously,
German
correct.
beer, and that is what you need, right? That the truest brand doesn't actually have a label, and this is in Munich, which is like the beer capital of the world. It's not known for any specific brand. It is just known for great beer.
Yeah.
And I thought
Correct.
that sort of blew my mind, because I didn't expect that. I wanted to go and find out, okay, what
So
is the best beer? What should I take back? And they're like, it's all good. You can have whatever you want.
yeah.
Yeah.
So to complete what I was saying before, we mentioned Oktoberfest starts in September, and beer gardens actually was because the decree was that you could only brew beer during a period from 29th September to do you know the end date?
No.
23rd April, right? So from the Feast of St. Michael to
Oh,
Feast of St. George. So technically, from
interesting.
today in old Germany or old Bavaria, you couldn't brew beer because the hot season would begin and it would result in basically fires, right? So there was a ban
Okay.
on producing beer from 24th April to 28th September, which meant you
Nice.
had to store away beer and in a cool place. So you
Understood.
dug into the ground, and on top you built a garden so that it is further cooled, right? And that is the origin of beer gardens and September Fest, etc., etc. Sorry, Oktoberfest, etc., etc. So there you go.
We are recording on 20th
I'm guessing so.
April.
Therefore, Oktoberfest is basically to finish off old stock, no? Because you can start manufacturing from 29th September. Whatever is left behind in the cellar, you
Interesting.
just drink up and
Yeah.
finish up.
Does it mature like old beer though? No, we don't know.
Sorry.
No, they say mature like old wine, right? So does beer also mature like old wine?
But one thing that we didn't touch upon, if we have 5 minutes, is that
Yeah.
I think there is an inherent value to brands, right? There is an inherent value to brands. There is an inherent value to storytelling. There is an inherent value to creating experiences, right? And turning sort of, when we spoke about the cost plus model as opposed to a pricing reservation price basically means, I think, whatever you're willing to pay for it is the correct price, right? First degree price differentiation. So person A might value something at X versus someone else at Y because they are looking
Yeah.
at the value they get out of it. And the value is tremendously enhanced when there is a great story behind it, right? Whether it is around, let's say, the Oktoberfest itself, which is a great branding exercise, right? In Germany
Yeah.
and all of that. And realistically, I would assume there is not much difference in a beer you drink in Bangalore versus the one you drink in Germany. But because of the whole story
Okay.
and the whole the utilitarian value of a beer at the end of the day is the utilitarian value of a beer, right? Because you and I famously said we don't care about the brand of alcohol that we drink.
See, you can actually taste the acid that gets added to your regular pint of Kingfisher, as opposed to a freshly brewed pint of beer that you get in a good brewery, right? And
Yeah, sure.
you will obviously taste the quality of water in beer. It's the
No,
most
I'm saying that
important component in beer.
there are reasonably decent breweries in Bangalore also. This is my
Yeah.
limited point. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
So,
they're
but I feel
quite
like
good
there
for
is.
the quality of water that you get in. I mean, Bangalore has a lake full of foam, man. We are the beer capital of India.
You do realize they're not just taking a mug and pouring water from the lake into the freaking thing. Right? There is
I've spent
obviously some kind of process.
many years of my life in the traffic jam at Bellandur Lake to know exactly their brewing processes. But yeah, but anyway.
Yeah,
No,
there's
I
so
have
much.
I have this question that I wanted to ask you, right? So we
Hmm.
spoke about Nike, Adidas, we spoke about DBS, whatever. Now all the brands, the Birkin bag, all the brands that we spoke about today are brands that were built. I would even say in the not just in the. I mean, majority of them are from the 20th century. Very few of
Yeah,
them maybe from the 21st. I can't think of any
or
big.
older, 20th century or older.
Yeah, or older. Where are the brands? Where are the new brands? And why is it that we are not seeing more brands popping and staying relevant for longer periods of time? Sure, there is the
Yeah,
odd brand
because
that comes, but like all birds, for instance, right? It came and then it went, right? It's not in vogue anymore.
whole point, I think, being it's a function of how media consumption has changed, right? And
Exactly.
yeah, and you had lots of time in the past to just be bored and like consume
Yes.
stuff when we actually look forward to consuming ads, right? Like ads were cool content once upon a time, and therefore you invested heavily in creating the myth, in creating the story, in creating the narrative.
Yeah.
But then we moved on to the
TikToks.
attention economy, right? Which meant that attention was currency. And so much so that I think the latest term is we moved past the attention economy into the addiction economy. It's not
Yeah.
even like you're consuming one thing and being happy with it. You're already moving on to the next thing and you're like consuming shit tons of content in a very short span of time. And there is no time for effective storytelling. And to create a brand, obviously, you can't manufacture a legacy or a story out of thin air, right? It has to be consistently
time.
crafted. Yeah, it needs time. Yeah, it needs time. It needs love. It needs affection. It needs good storytelling, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think
No,
there is.
I would argue that the storytelling is still good. It's just that the storytellers don't have time, and hence it's much harder
You
for
mean
them
the
to stay
story
relevant.
listeners don't have time because they're
Because
all
the story
listening to
listeners.
Leftover Lasagne.
Because they're listening too much, right? They're watching too much. And it's the same with personal brands, it's the same with consumer brands. It's very tough for a brand to stay relevant for too long because the next shiny object, which is telling its own story, emerges out of nowhere and takes the limelight
Correct.
for a few
Correct.
months before that also fades into relevance. So we are probably
So,
living in a
I think
post-brand world, right?
Just saying we're living in a post-brand world, I think there is also the other side of things where we've effectively on the business side of things moved from looking at sustainable business and looking at business that scales quickly and can be valued very fast at billions of dollars and you can make a quick exit from, right? You're essentially looking pump and dump, right? So even as an investor, you're no longer spending time in lovingly creating a brand as much as you're trying to create scale or create a revenue model, or not necessarily even a revenue model, right? Or create the first X number of people who will use your product so then you can sort of find investors. And the whole intent is to sort of create something bigger, not necessarily better, right? I think the classic example is Byju's. If you look at why it succeeded and why it failed, it was brilliant in the sense that that man was a very, very compelling teacher, right? And he got into it because of his love for teaching. And he sold out auditorium after auditorium in Bangalore, right? Which is no mean feat considering the time and place in which it existed, right? It's not like there was no other CAT class or there was no other IT class, etc., etc. But he was a person who loved teaching and sort of was able to convey it into a format that made sense. And realistically, it is based on everything that we spoke of in terms of scarcity for educational institutions, etc. It is a very profitable sort of business, right? But the thing that led to its downfall is basically the greed and the chasing of the scale, whereas the story itself was quite compelling to begin.
Yeah, sure. I agree.
So I'm saying it's getting squeezed from both sides. One is that there is the attention economy. Second is that people are no longer building things to last. In fact, the whole promise and premise of the Hermes, the Birkin bag, is that you can get it repaired at any point in time, right? Even like
Right,
30
yeah.
years after you've bought the bag, if there is something that is, off about it, they will hand repair it for you, right? Can you imagine like 30
Yeah.
years, right? Like what
Correct.
is the last thing that you've owned? I know you keep shoes for 6 to 10 years and shirts but you know what I mean, right? Like even the TVs of today, right? Like they don't last beyond 2 years or anything like that, right? As much as the screens and quality have become better, we don't build things to last anymore. And I guess
I was thinking, since I was asking you what are the brands that have emerged, at least in the fashion space in the last few years, finally one or two brands came to my mind, and one of them is, of course, Zara. And you mentioned brands are not being built to last. Zara is not even building products that are meant to last, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
I think that's.
And they are, as we speak, beating a retreat from India, right? They've sort of given up their flagship store in Bombay and I think also in Delhi, right? Like, which is a huge kind of space. But their products are also not necessarily luxury.
Yeah, they're overpriced junk.
Correct.
If your claim to fame is that this stuff is not going to last long because fashion is very fast moving. Sorry, India is a very value obsessed market at the end of the day. I'm glad they're failing, at least in India. Yeah. Rubbish. Decathlon for the win. Everyone please go and buy Decathlon stuff, right? At the end of all the talk about brands and saying that we don't care for brands.
This is the new start of the midlife crisis is anyone who signs up for a half marathon, right? And I think that is what has also triggered the Decathlon madness, wherein
no man, Decathlon is great products at great prices and excellent customer service and super variety. It literally is a one-stop shop. You go there, there is no
Are they
sporting.
sponsoring us?
I hope they would. No man, I seriously love Decathlon. If there's a Decathlon store, I will just stop and peep in there and just look at the exact same stuff that I've seen in 25 other Decathlon stores and not buy anything. I might buy some small pair of socks or one towel, some shit, and go. Yeah, I can easily kill an hour inside a Decathlon.
Good job.
So should you. Yeah. So we are recording on 24th April, which is famously Sachin Tendulkar's birthday, which is also one day after 3rd of April, which is famously Tony Sebastian's birthday. And Tony Sebastian's birthday is a signal to all of Germany to stop producing beer. Who would have thought?
Correct.
For the rest of the year. Yeah, for the rest of the
Lock
summer.
up your beers.
Happy birthday, Tony, who has turned 38 years old. Branded for life.
Thanks, Dad. What is? Oh, you're saying we have to end the podcast here. Okay. Yeah.
No.
Understood.
Right. This is not Germany now. We can keep going.
I think we have potted around the beer garden enough for this to turn into something.
This is episode 38, by the way? No, it's episode
It's
37.
episode 37.
Ooh.
Ooh. You brought episode 37 to an end by saying, I have turned 38. Beautiful. Well done.
You also brought
I am
37
no
years of
longer
life to an end.
no longer in the prime of my life because
38 is not a prime number.
Yeah.
Such composite puns are appreciated on this podcast.
Okay, on that note of branded for life, you have been granted the rest of your life. Please go forth and live. And in the comments, please tell us, like, what are the brands that you aspire for and why? And like,
Yeah. Hopefully, at least
what should we talk about next?
Hopefully, our listeners are aspiring for brands, right? Unlike us.
On that note, that was episode 37 of Leftover Lasagne. We don't know when we'll record again, but we will.
Hopefully, before Tony turns 39. But now, the next episode otherwise will end up being, the episode number will be bigger than your age, and that can't be acceptable. So we have to wait for 1 year.
Yes. Or we record before you turn 40, which is
Ooh, plenty of months. Lots of time to get there.
lots of
That's what I'm telling myself.
I love how we end up every episode by reminding our listeners that they have no reason to be here. Even if they don't have it, we instill buyer's remorse into them. This is the true meaning of a brand that is built to last. Is the one that says, stop, enough, get outside, touch grass.
Correct.
Right? Like, there is more to life than leftover lasagna. We know you love us, but we'll always be a product or a service that is limited in its distribution, limited in its availability.
We are the Google search box of podcasts, right? So we don't want you to stay here. Go away. You come here, land here, find what you want, and go to other parts of the internet.
Okay, that fine. Seek and you shall find. On that note, let's say bye, Nitin, and hope to meet again soon.
Yes, see you. Bye. Enjoy.
But also please like, share, subscribe.
Yeah. Tell 4 friends
Tell a
about
friend.
this podcast. Yeah.
Please, as a birthday gift to me, please tell someone about Leftover Lasagne.
And put comments, tell us about the brands you love and admire.
Really branded for life. Okay, chalo. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Leftover Lasagne.
Leftover lasagna.
Lasagna, no way.
It's a type of sandwich.
Some kind of gross pasta. Leftover Lasagna is a podcast
hosted
by my
Nitin
charge
Sundar and Tony Uncle. Leftover lasagna.
Very funny name.